Hello there. This is Douglas Block again. Welcome to your live, actually my fourth live video chat on YouTube. And nice to see you. It's a beautiful morning again in Oregon. We're having a great fall. And I think I mentioned last time I was going on a bike ride after my last video chat on Saturday morning. And I'm doing the same today, as long as this nice weather keeps up. So I think I'll talk about a video I'm about to upload on Monday, October 9th, called Will These Bouts of Depression Ever End? I'll start. So a lot of times people come up to me in the middle of a depressive episode and say, will this ever end? Will I ever get out of this? And the answer is, this too shall pass, because it always does. However, another question which is more difficult to answer is, well, now that I'm coming out of this depression, do I have to worry about another one? And the answer is, I'm afraid so, because my experience in my life over 50 years and also in my clients' lives over the last 20 years is that depression, like addiction, is a chronic relapsing condition. And that hey, Doc, don't forget the joke. Oh, all right, so I got to come up with a joke. Okay, why was the scarecrow an outstanding neurosurgeon? Well, okay, I gave the pun away. Well, let me say it again. Why was the scarecrow a successful neurosurgeon? He was outstanding in his field. How's that? Hi, John. It's going well. John Andrew Cameron from Great Britain says hello. Hey, have you contacted that guy, Mr. Goucher in Scotland? I hope you're still in touch with him. Corin is his name, C-O-R-A-N. I hope you're still in touch with him. Okay, again, the joke. Why was the scarecrow a successful neurosurgeon? He was outstanding in his field. Oh, great. You're speaking on Facebook. Nice work, John. Keep in touch with Corin. This is the lifeline for recovery. I have a nephew who was just on the phone with my partner. He just was told by his wife that she is leaving him for somebody else. And he's devastated. He's, feeling hopeless, suicidal, like people with depression do. Because I did a video called "The Number One Cause of Depression is Loss of Love, is Divorce, is, death of spouse, child, etc." It's true. So what do we do for him? We encourage him to get into a divorce support group, to make an appointment with his counselor, stay in touch with his dad, have lunch with us. This is what it takes to basically weather these storms. Anyway, getting back to my my next video about will these bouts of depression ever end? As I said, depression is a chronic relapsing condition. Can you say hello to Michelle as well, my partner? Yes. Hi, Michelle. Nice to talk to you. Let me see. In Britain, it must be 7:10 p.m. right now. So I hope you're enjoying the nice weather we're enjoying here in Oregon. So why is this? Why is depression a chronic relapsing condition? Well, because of the fact that we have a brain disorder. We have a proclivity in our brain that when stress comes, we break at the weakest link, and that is our brain chemistry. So either going to an anxiety attack or going to a depression, hopelessness. This is what occurs. Evelyn Prang says, hi, joined last time as well. I was terribly worried about whether the information I gave you will be confidential. Can you comment? Yes, of course it will be confidential. I mean, once these videos are done, I just upload them and forget about them. So I'm not going to mention anything you said to me to anybody else, or, so any question you ask, I'll answer, of course, on the channel as we're doing this live. And obviously other people will know that you're asking the question, because, it will show up. But yes, of course it's confidential. It doesn't go outside this room. And as I said, once I'm done with the video, I just posted to YouTube. And by the way, these comments, yeah, good point. The comments, the questions you ask me when I post the YouTube on video, when it gets posted, I don't post it. When YouTube posted, none of these comments show. The only thing that shows are the comments that people make once the video is up and running. So anything you say here will not be, put in print or in any way, kept for other people to see. So I hope that answers your question. So, by the way, ask me any questions you want. I'm here to answer them. Anything about depression recovery, anxiety, etc. So I have had one, two, three, four bouts of depression in when I was 27, 36, 42, and 50, 59. And no, not 59. What am I talking about? Um, 65. God, I'm not giving myself enough credit for enough years between them. So, but, uh, you know, every time I think this is the end of it, it will never happen to me again, it happens. So now I've decided that uh, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Now, does that mean I'm going to go back into the hospital? Not necessarily, because when you practice your recovery tools one day at a time, when a depression comes, you can make it shorter, you can make it less intense, and you can also spread out the time between your relapses, quote unquote. So the good news is that although it's a relapsing condition, you do have control over how long it takes between conditions, and once they come, how short or long they are, and how deep they go by just practicing your tools. I remember a guy in my one of my groups. He had dual diagnosis. He had alcoholism and he had depression. So he was basically working on his sobriety. He noticed that actually he was bipolar. He noticed anytime he drank that he would go into a manic phase. Oh, Valley of Ghost says, hi Douglas, your video is an experience of health. Many thanks. You're more than welcome. Scott says, I'm halfway through the book. When going through Hell Don't Stop. I love it. I never thought my divorce would put me in such a state of depression. Well, as you can see in that book, When Going Through Hell Don't Stop, it put me in the state of depression. And again, from my experience, I mean, I would say that 50% of the people who come into my depression support groups here in Portland, Oregon, have experienced some kind of a loss in the last 18 months. The most common is divorce, by far the most common, or breakup of a significant relationship, which is the same thing. So yes, it did bring you down, but again, you can come out of it over time. So this guy was realized that when he drank, he would get manic. So for 22 years, he stopped drinking. You thought, well, after 22 years and going to AA meetings, he's pretty much done with his drinking problem. But then one day, he started to have major problems in his marriage. It didn't happen one day; it built up over time. And then he also um, started to have issues at work, and they were going to lay him off because the company wasn't making money. And before you knew it, he was stressed out. So what do? He turned to taking out of the drink, and as a result, he got manic, and then he crashed. What goes up must come down, says Isaac Newton, right? And then he ended up back in a recovery center inpatient treatment after 22 years of sobriety. So, it's this happens, and I know many of my clients and people I know, his friends, have. Lisa says, my first depressive episode came when I stopped a drug called Rexulti, and this time it seems to come after a drug called Strattera. I think there's a relationship. It's just common. Well, Strattera is an ADD drug for attention deficit disorder. I'm not quite sure what Rexulti is, and so I'm not really quite sure why stopping the drug would bring on depression, although Strattera as a ADD drug could have lifted your mood a little bit. But I would talk to your psychiatrist or your pharmacist, even better, and ask why stopping these drugs would bring you into depression. I'm not really quite sure. I don't have a lot of experience with those drugs. My goddaughter was put on Strattera for attention deficit, and I'm not quite sure what the first drug is that you mentioned. Let me see what you said it was. Rexulti. If you could make another comment, let me know what that drug is for. I mean, I could look it up on the internet when we're done, but so I'm not quite sure why that caused. It's a mood stabilizer, okay? Well, one of the things that a mood stabilizer does, it evens out your moods and protects you from the ups or the downs. So it is quite possible after you stopped a mood stabilizer that you went back into depression. Now, this is a really important question you asked, because I was having this conversation with my nurse practitioner. I'm on Wellbutrin, which is an antidepressant working on the dopamine receptors up here, and I'm also on something called Lamictal, which, like your drug, is a mood stabilizer. And he does not want me to go off either, for fear that when I stop either of them, if I stop either of them, I will go back into the depression, even though I've been stable now for 20 months, but what's 20 months, right? So it is possible that stopping the mood stabilizer. I wonder why you stopped it. Was it helping? If it was helping, I wonder why you stopped it. Maybe you had side effects. Maybe you thought you didn't need it. But I'd be curious as to why you stopped the medication. Just the reason. I have another example of a woman in my group. Side effects. Well, yeah, Lisa, that's a common reason many people stop drugs. Well, is there another new mood stabilizer you can try that has less side effects that you might be able to stay on and keep on? Again, it's all trial and error. Nobody knows until you take it. By the way, what were the side effects of this medication? In case I have people in my group trying it out, since I do have a number of bipolar people I'm working with. So let me know when you make your comment what the side effects are. So gal in my group was called rapid cycling bipolar. That means you have 4 or more episodes within a year of manic and depression, mania and depression. Hers actually occurred about every 3 weeks. Is there a spiritual side to depression, i.e. causation related to spiritual issues? Well, Mr. Blue Eyes, in the sense that people often get depressed when they lose their sense of purpose and meaning in life. I have a whole video called The Role of Purpose in Healing from Depression. When people have what's called an existential crisis, why am I here? What am I doing here? What's the meaning of things? I feel like I'm a leaf floating in the wind without direction. That can bring on a sense of depression, despair, hopelessness. So yes, not having a clear spiritual direction can make you more vulnerable. Conversely, having a sense of purpose and meaning, as Viktor Frankl found out in World War II, and when he wrote about it in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that can really help you get out of depression. Lisa says, it was fine for a month, really great. Then I increased the dose and I had panic attacks for 12 hours, sent me to Europe, and I'm very drug sensitive, may not have this effect. Well, if you had that panic attack when you increased the drug, what about lowering it again to your previous dose? And maybe that would get you back into a place without side effects. Anyway, I'm sorry that happened. And a lot of people are drug sensitive. I'm going to be posting a video. Excuse me, take a drink of water here. On the 16th of October, which some people are going to find controversial. It's called, it's a movie on something, it's a video on something called akathisia, which is a side effect that about 5% of the people experience who take antidepressants, which is an agitation and a moving around back and forth, not being able to sit still, and it drives people nuts. They feel like they're jumping out of their skin, and that is something to watch out for. But you can prevent akathisia by starting really low, like taking the dose you would normally start with and cutting the pill in quarters and then taking it small doses. So maybe you can go back to your other dose and start over again. Anyway, this woman was going up and down every 2 weeks, and she finally found something called Lexapro, an antidepressant that many of you are familiar with, no doubt. And she took it, and lo and behold, 2 weeks went by, no downturn. Another 2 weeks, no downturn. Another 2 weeks. This went on for 20 weeks. Rayudu, thank you it's great to hear from you also. Thanks for saying it's great to see me. Let me know if you have any questions. Anyway, this went on for about 24 weeks, 12 cycles where there was no dropping into depression on this Lexapro. And then one day she didn't come to group, and I figured, uh-oh, the Lexapro stopped working. And sure enough, it did stop working. And she crashed. So, yeah, it's hard to stay free of this stuff forever. But as I said earlier, you practice the tools that we teach in these videos on my website, healingfromdepression.com, and all the. I think if you type in depression on in Google, I think you get like 2.8 million hits. I mean, wow. You could spend the rest of your life researching depression. Magda says, "Hi, Douglas. Nice to see you. Greetings from the Netherlands." Oh, yes. I was in Amsterdam at the Van Gogh Museum in 1982, and I loved it. I just read an article speaking of Utrecht. Isn't that in Holland? Utrecht, the city. Let me know, because It's either in Holland or Denmark. I think it's in Holland. Anyway, there was a big article in the New York Times saying that Utrecht had the largest parking garage in the world for bicycles. And evidently, cycling is really big in Holland. And as you may have known from watching my previous videos, I love to ride bikes. I am a cyclist, not obviously professional one, uh, not at 68 anyway. Although I guess there are people my age who do still race, but no, I just do it for recreation, for the mood boosting effects. Anyway, bicycle riding is supposed to be really big in Holland and really promoted by the government, and a lot of people ride bikes. So let me know if that's true. Anyway, speaking of Holland, I have a client from Denmark, which Copenhagen, which I guess is somewhat close. I should get at my atlas, but and yes, it is big in Holland. Hey, how close are you to Denmark, by the way? Is it to the east or west or above you? Anyway, significantly further north in Portland, Oregon. We're at the 45th parallel here. And what happens is that when the winters come, thanks for your work. We'll be checking your video on Monday. Yes, Lisa. Well, the one on Monday coming up on October 9th is on Will These Bouts of Depression Ever End? What I was just talking about. And so every Monday, by the way, something is posted on my channel. Anyway, getting back to my client in Denmark, evidently when the winters come, the days get really, really short. Sometimes maybe the sun starts to go down like at 3 o'clock or something, and you have long, long nights. And people, he says, without the sunlight, start to get depressed, because we know that light is extremely important for good mental and physical health. It regulates your circadian rhythms and the production of melatonin. It affects your sleep cycle. So I'm wondering if in Holland people have seasonal affective disorder because of the latitude. So yeah, but anyway, it can be healed. I think I've shown people this before. Let me get it right now. This is something called, oops, I'm like kicking my stand, right? This is something called a light book. And here it is right here. You turn it on, hold it about 18 inches to your face, and do it for 20 minutes first thing in the morning. Reset your circadian rhythms, and you basically are not as affected by the dark days and the short days and the long nights. So yeah, it's really cool. It's been years I've been on flights and airports. How do we come out of that? I'm not quite sure what you mean, right, about being on flights and airports. What are your thoughts on Weiss says on antipsychotic and antidepressant for refractory depression? Doctor says I said, but one of the side effects is abnormal movements that can be permanent. Yeah, that's akathisia. Hey, I'll watch my next video. Greetings from New York City, Mr. B says. Well, anyway, yes, antipsychotics can really help. There's one called Abilify you might want to check out that's really, really can be really helpful. And it can really help antidepressants. And akathisia, these restless movements that you can't stop, is often a side effect. And so you need to start on the antipsychotic really low and watch it. And Weiss says, I greatly appreciate your videos. Thank you. Well, one way you can thank me is you can go to the super chat function where you can make a donation to this channel. It takes a lot of work to do these videos. Believe me, at least I'm not bored, right? I'm so busy creating these videos for you guys and doing these chats. But getting back to the question about the antipsychotic, start a low dose. Abilify has been really helpful for so many of my clients and my friends. But start low, and if you start to have the restless movements of akathisia, stop it. It won't be permanent unless you take it for a long period of time. So I would try the antipsychotic. Let me know what it is. I'd be curious. Let me put my my life book over here just for a second. Yeah. So there was a question someone asked about the coping skill of mindfulness, says Mr. Bly, is always linked to meditation with a spiritual side, but looking into local mindfulness scripts, and they all seem to be linked to Buddhist practices. That's true. There's something called Vipassana meditation that came out of Burma, a Buddhist country, of course, but people come and there are groups like that in Portland, and they're not really associated with any spiritual path. You just basically watch your breath and stay in the moment. But even the ones that are associated with Buddhism, when you go to a mindfulness group practice, you don't really get a lecture on Buddhism, and they don't try to convert you. So, Mr. Star says, thanks, Doug, for all you do. I'm on Lexapro and Seroquel. It's been a long-term good combo for me. Whenever I try to get off the Seroquel, it's not good. Yeah, well, those are very common medications that people use. I have a client who is trying to turn down her Seroquel. Helps her sleep, helps her move. Whenever she lowers it, she starts to get depressed again. So, what can I say except that sometimes, it's cost benefit analysis. I mean, nobody likes to be on medications, obviously, but when the benefits are more positive than the costs, I don't know, Seroquel for some people causes weight gain. It can make you drowsy in the morning. Let me know if you have those side effects, by the way. But I've seen it help many people with anxiety, with sleep, and with mood, all three of those. Exactly. N-Star says, I fought to lower and get them up for years. Well, hey, go listen to my video on Monday. I have this conversation with my nurse practitioner. The same thing. I want to lower the lower the Wellbutrin. I want to lower the Lamictal. He says it's not worth it anymore. Well, I'm glad you came to that conclusion because this is exactly what my nurse practitioner tells me. Don't lower these things. Fear of flights, I get panic attacks. Well, there are very good therapies that help you overcome phobias, and specifically fear of flying is a huge phobia. Some weight gain. I also have sleep apnea. Well, hopefully using a CPAP machine and Star that helps a lot of my clients. But the person who talked about fear of flights, there are lots of psychologists who practice anxiety, working with anxiety disorders that can give you techniques to overcome the fear. Also, my one of my friends who travels around the world giving lectures and has a fear of flying takes Ambien, which is a sleep medication. She just sleeps through the flights. that helps her. So that might be good too to try medication. Magda says I'm using duloxetine 90 milligrams for 1 year. I have trouble to express feelings like crying. What do I do? Well, could you tell me what that medication is? Duloxetine. Haven't heard of it. Maybe it's a chemical name for a brand name I've heard of. But anyway, anytime you have a question about side effects of medication, the person you go to is your psychiatrist, your nurse practitioner. Better to use than GPs or primary care physicians, PCPs. They're not specialists. And when you're dealing with, the brain disorder of depression or anxiety, and these are such complex things, and these drugs are so complex themselves, it's really good to go to someone who all they do is, read the literature and study these drugs. So psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner or psychiatrist. I went to an osteopath who practiced psychiatry, who was really good. I referred many of my clients to him. He got really good results. So there are doctors who don't have MDs who still can specialize in psychiatry and know what they're doing. So in terms of the side effects of that drug, I don't really know since I've not worked with that drug. But again, go to your practitioner. I want to talk about a little bit about this whole idea of lowering medication. This is very important because the people say, I don't want to be dependent, quote unquote, on medication. Well, I really like the way I look better without glasses, but if I take my glasses off, I can't see 8 inches in front of me. Magna says, thanks. What I couldn't walk. I certainly couldn't drive, right? So sometimes we have to accept that we have dependencies on things, like we depended on other people, right? I know somebody in my group who finally started dealing with his drinking problem. He's not an alcoholic, but he had one, and he started going to AA meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And after about 4 weeks, he says, I don't feel isolated anymore. I'm in with people. Well, this is really important. We need people. And remember what Barbara Streisand said in her world famous song from the play Funny Girl. People who need people are the luckiest people in the world. So we're dependent on people. We're dependent on air. We're dependent on food. We're dependent on water. We're dependent on sunlight. We're dependent on our grocery stores having food in them. We're dependent on so many things. So at any rate, so being dependent on antidepressants or antipsychotics, or, that's another type of dependency. Well, I like to say we're interdependent. Okay, a couple more questions. Writer says, can you spell out the medicine? What medicine are you referring to? Uh, N-Star says, it's a broken world with all kinds of disease and illness, and this is ours. Accept our reality, accept treatment without judgment. Good point. When people have a condition like diabetes, like my best friend, type 1, when he was in his late 50s, he discovered he had it. It was a shock, except the fact his father had it. So, it took him a while to accept, I've got diabetes. What am I going to do? Well, accept it, shoot your insulin every day, and live a long life, which, many people do. My brother-in-law he just turned 70. He's still building homes and doing all sorts of things. And he's a type 1 diabetic. So yeah, I agree with you. We have to at some point come to acceptance. It's about acceptance and not cure. So, okay, I've got depression. It's a disorder. It's a lifelong disorder. So what do I do about it? Can I still live a fulfilling and productive life? And the answer is yes. I mean, look at all the great people who have had depression and have had extremely fulfilling and productive lives, like Winston Churchill, who saved Western civilization during World War II, or Abraham Lincoln, who saved the Union during the Civil War, two classic cases, or Teddy Roosevelt, who started national parks, or William Styron, the author who wrote Darkness Visible and Sophie's Choice and The Confessions of Nat Turner and all these great novels, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, especially artists. James Taylor was at the famous McLean Hospital when he wrote his first album, was about his experience there. An amazing album, by the way. If you like James Taylor, get his first album. It's just called James Taylor. So people with depression, people bipolar disorder, especially people who are productive. Matter of fact, they are more creative than the average person. Kay Jamison, who's a very famous psychologist who wrote a book called An Unquiet Mind. Any of you who have bipolar disorder may want to read that book. It's her memoir about dealing with it. She wrote a book called Touched with Fire about famous creative people, artists, writers, poets, musicians, who all have manic depression. And she says that one of the reasons that it stays in the genetic pool, the gene for bipolar disorder, is that because we need creative people like this, and it's so obviously associated with creativity that to get rid of the gene would be to get rid of all the creative people that we're so indebted to, like Virginia Woolf and so many other people. So yeah, say it loud, I'm depressed and I'm proud. What can I tell you? No shame in having depression, no shame in having bipolar disorder, no shame in having anxiety, no shame in having schizophrenia, ADHD, alcoholism, the list goes on. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you remember when Al Gore was president, his wife Tipper Gore had depression, and she appointed a guy named David Sucher to, I think that was his name, another something similar to that, who was the guy who runs Surgeon General. His name was Surgeon General, and he came out in 1999 with a report on the nation's mental health. Amazing. You should go to the U.S. government website and find it. Anyway, he says that in any given year, 1 out of 5 Americans, or 20%, actually it was 23%, suffer from a mental health disorder. And get this, over the course of a lifetime, 50% of all Americans suffer from a mental health diagnosis. I'm sure this is the same in Europe and even third world countries. Depression is a problem, as is other psychiatric conditions. So, it's common. It's part of the human condition. Say it loud, I'm depressed and I'm proud. I mean, there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a universal condition that half the population deals with at some point in their lives. Not depression, but some sort of mental health disorder. What do you think about politicians' support profiling people with mental health issues and preventing from buying guns? Well, I don't know if profiling is the right word to use. And of course, most people with mental health issues are not violent. They're mostly violent towards themselves. Actually, the reason for preventing someone from having a gun is not because they're going to use it on themselves. It's on other people. It's because they're going to use it on themselves. I know the guns rights lobby is very big, and everybody should have the right to bear arms. The Second Amendment. What they don't know is the more people are killed with guns for suicide than homicide. Half of the people, twice as many people turn the guns on themselves. So the real problem of having a gun in the house is that when you're despairing and when you feel like there's no hope, you'll become impulsive and take the gun and shoot yourself. So uh, that's one reason why people with mental illness should not have guns. But yeah, I mean, in terms of protecting the public, I mean, there's a big stigma about mental illness because a lot of people who have committed crimes, like the guy who killed John Lennon or shot Ronald Reagan, did have schizophrenia. You know, they were severely mentally ill. Depression is a different thing entirely. People with depression are no more likely to shoot somebody or commit mass murder than anybody else. But you know, that's a tough call about, you know, if a person has a mental illness not having a gun. I don't really know what to say about that, but in some cases, if someone is paranoid or is delusional, it's probably a good idea not to have weapons on them. Uh, will this increase stigma of mental health and prevent people from seeking help? Canadian here. Will what increase the stigma of mental health? Illness? I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. Maybe you can elaborate on the question. Have your friends kept your guns for a while if you're going through a tough time? Well, hey, hey, I'm a New York Jew, right? I mean, nobody owns guns where I come from, right? They own subway passes is what they own, right? But in all seriousness, we had a gal living in the country, owned a gun, came into groups saying she wanted to kill herself, and we called her best friend and said, "Will you please take the gun out of the house and keep it away from her until she gets well?" And that's what happened. I have another person who lives up the river from me. Same idea. Was going through a depressive episode, hopeless, suicidal, and then he gave the gun to a friend and kept it out of the home. See, the problem with the suicide is that um, oftentimes the decision is made within 5 minutes before the attempt. Now, this is why they finally got a net on the Golden Gate Bridge, because you know, that's the place where more people commit suicide than any other place. And you know, people who have survived the jumps into the bay say that it was an impulsive decision, and if there had been a net there, they would not have, you know, fallen to the water. The very few who actually survived that jump. So yeah, it's impulsive. I remember one time in New York, I was going for a job interview, and I had anxiety off and on for 9 months, and I was living with my parents. So I was essentially disabled. I was trying to become more independent. So I had this job interview about 10 miles away down the highway, and I started to get anxious. I got so frustrated that I took this bottle of tranquilizers and I ingested maybe 2/3 of it. And I said, "Fuck it, I don't care if I die." And I drove off on the line, the expressway, in traffic on tranquilizers. I don't know how I made it home alive, but fortunately the interview had been canceled, so I was able to turn around and drive home just as the effects of the tranquilizer were coming on, and I survived. But that was clearly an impulsive decision, swallowing, you know, a half a bottle, 2/3 of a bottle of these tranquilizers. Fortunately, there weren't a whole lot left, but I ended up coming home and vomiting them out. It was, you know, it was bad news, but my decision was not premeditated. I mean, sometimes it is, but more often it's not. So keeping the means of, you know, self-harm out of reach, you know, keep when I was depressed in 2015-16, I told Joan, my partner, take all these pills that I haven't used, the Elavil and the, you know, the nortriptyline and the Prozac and the Klonopin, and take these out of my you know, our bedroom, and hide them somewhere, because I don't trust myself. Keep the medications away. And that's exactly what you need to do when someone is, you know, feeling like they're going to harm themselves. So, and that's really critical. So yeah, I would agree. Keep all methods of self-harm out of the house. This is referring to the prior question regarding people with mental health issues prevented from buying guns. Yeah, well, it probably does increase the stigma, because, you know, then there's this perception that people with mental illness are more violent than other people. Completely inaccurate. So yeah, I would say that anytime someone with especially schizophrenia does something violent, people get afraid and think that everybody's like that. N Star says, I went to the hospital in 2016, right around the time you did. You've helped me a lot. Well, thank you. Hopefully you're out of the hospital, obviously, and hopefully you're doing better. Yeah, what about psychiatric hospitals? They're certainly not like going to the Hilton. And I used to think that they were all psychiatric hospitals were bad until I had to go into one myself. So, there is a place for them. Do people get? I have a friend who's very depressed and suicide, and she says, "What is going to the hospital going to do for me? Really, they're just going to give me some drugs and 5 days, and then they're going to toss me out. So it's not really going to heal me." You're right. You don't get well in hospitals, but they are good for crisis stabilization. When you're in that hospital for 5 days, uh, you're probably going to be safe, and that's why you should go in when you're not feeling safe. The other reason to go into a hospital, as I described in, I have 3 videos on psychiatric hospitals. You can look them up on the channel. Part 1, 2, and 3. And part 1 talks about if you're not feeling safe, or if you are feeling so disabled you can't function, that's when you should go to the ER room or call your doctor or your psychiatrist and have them admit you to the hospital, because you're not able to function on your own, or you're a danger to yourself or others. So I've had a number of my clients go into hospitals when they're falling apart. They stay there, they get stabilized, they come out, they go into something called day treatment or outpatient treatment, and they get better. So the hospital was a good place, when there's a crisis. I would say they're getting more and more humane. The treatments are more humane. The people, when I was at St. Vincent's here in Portland, the people were incredibly compassionate. We had a yoga teacher there teaching me yoga. I love my art therapy group. I met my art therapist after I came out, and we, gave each other a hug. So yeah, there's a time and a place for hospitals. But in terms of the stigma, it still exists. And the only way to overcome that is for people like us to talk about it, to show that people who live with depression and be just like, quote unquote, the rest of us. Okay, a couple more questions came up. Adrian says, your videos have been very helpful. Thank you. Your voice and tone are very soothing. You give hope to this awful condition. Yeah, it is definitely awful. And you are right. There is hope. You know, I say so often, what goes down must come up, right? I mean, winter is followed by spring. Death is followed by resurrection. These are very, very archetypal truths. My favorite symbol, which I use in the cover of my book when going through Hell Don't Stop, is the phoenix bird. As you know, that bird is a mythological creature. It lived 500 years. Then it burned itself in a funeral pyre, and then you think that's it, right? But then out of the ashes, the bird rose again. Go look on the internet under Google Images and find some really cool images of the phoenix bird. I have one on my refrigerator. The rising from the ashes is exactly what happens when people come out of bad episodes of depression. They rise from the ashes, and there they are, resurrected for another 500 years until the cycle repeats. So use that image. Yes, of course there's hope, but you can't do it alone. You have to reach out for support. Very few people get healed in isolation. So there are structures out there like these intensive outpatient programs that are so helpful. Call your local hospital, like 12-step groups. I had a gal in my depression support group who needed support, and she went to an AA meeting, and they said, "Why are you here?" She said, "I have a desire not to drink." Well, that was true. She didn't have a drinking problem, but she had a desire not to drink. But she found these 12-step groups a place to go, people to be with, a way to structure her day. They were very helpful until she got better. So wherever it is, seek out support. That's one of my members. I said earlier in the video, I said, this person who's going to AA groups for the first time, lives alone, says, "Wow, I don't feel so isolated anymore. I just like going to a place and hearing other people in the same boat as I am talking about their condition." Something so simple is so healing. They're trying to find the latest and greatest drugs to heal from depression. It's a good thing to do, but there's nothing more healing than human contact and connection, more soothing. We come into the world dependent on our mothers. If we don't get touch and nurturance, it's called failure to thrive. Well, when people are adults and they don't get connection, they also fail to thrive. So it's the same thing. We are who we are. Is that nice guy said, we have to accept our condition as human beings, as mammals. We need each other. Mr. Blue Eye says, can ECT be done on an outpatient basis? Absolutely. A gal in my group in 2015 came in. First day she came in, she was like this in a fetal position, rocking back and forth like an autistic child. Hardly said a word. I thought, oh my God, what's going to happen? Well, when we found out from her partner that she was signed up for ECT the next week, she did 9 outpatient treatments where he would drive her to the hospital. She'd get the treatment. It only takes 10 minutes, actually. And then after she came down, she'd drive her back. And then, you know, what's about 3-4 weeks of treatments. After a month, she came back to the group. Hey, Doug, nice to see you. Nice to see everybody at the group. A completely different person, out of catatonia, completely well. So yes, outpatient treatments are very common. You just need to find someone to drive you there, wait for you, and drive you back. And I guess in this day and age, you can take Uber, right? So you don't even need a person to basically drive you there. But it's nice to have the company and the support. So yes, outpatient ECT is done all the time. Dorothy says, I feel it really difficult to let go of anger and resentment. Is there a way to get a better place? Yeah, that's a psychotherapeutic issue. There's a book called Your Perfect Right about assertiveness and anger. You should really go into therapy and find out what's bugging you. And oftentimes we stay angry when we don't forgive and we don't let go. And I have a nice video called Forgive Yourself for Your Mistakes. Oftentimes we're most angry at ourselves, but resentment, a huge condition. But you know, they say when you stay resentful towards somebody, it's like you know, drinking poison and expecting them to suffer or to die. You know, held in anger over time can be quite debilitating emotionally. So finding a way to release it. Some people like to take a tennis racket and bang the heck out of a couch and get it out through the body. So it's a complex thing, but it's a matter of getting the anger out physically and also, you know, trying to let go of whoever you're mad at. I would say, you know, find a good therapist and someone who deals with anger issues. But it's something that can definitely be worked through. What are your thoughts about marriage and anxiety? Never been married, and it seems relationships have been causing more stress in my life. Well, someone once said, show me a happy person, I'll show you someone not in a relationship. Oh, well, so yes, it is true that relationships are stressful, the downside, right? But the upside is the connection and the joy. So it's not an easy thing. My idol, author M. Scott Peck, said there's only 2 reasons to get married. One is to have children and the other is to grow through friction. So yes, there is friction, but if you have a good marriage counselor and you do a lot of communication, you can succeed, but it's a lot of hard work. But what are the gains? Intimacy, connection, which again are very healing. So yes, there's anxiety going to come up. Maybe it's difficult for you to go into a relationship, but if you have the right support, we have a guy in one of our groups who's lived alone for so long. He's 30 years old and he just found a woman to hang out with, and he says the companionship is just life-changing. So I think it's worth it, but it is hard work and you can't do it without help. So be with a therapist, see a couples counselor if you can, and give it a shot. Okay. N-Star says, ha ha, yes. Well, that is a funny joke, isn't it? How do you choose your music tunes? Relax me every time I watch a video. There's a guy named Joshin, who's my videographer, one of my videographers, Joshin and Jerry. Hey guys, I hope you're listening. Anyway, he's got this, at the end of the video, if you go look in the information below it, he has an attribution, and we have to get permission from this this musician to use his music. So if you go look under the comments section or in the comments section where the information is below the video, it'll tell you who the musician is. It's the same music every time. And so go there and check it out when, go to any of my past videos and scroll down. It usually says, I give a description of the video. Then I say, for more information, go to healingfromdepression.com. And then below that, there's a link to the site where my videographer got the music. So I like to make these videos between 45 minutes and an hour. We've been going for 44 minutes and 13 seconds according to YouTube. So I'll hang out a little bit in case anybody has any, you know, final questions to ask me. Douglas says, Mike, I just broke up a 6-year relationship. Does it take a while? I take it you mean, does it take a while to recover? Well, yeah, absolutely. It's a death, you know, and so the greatest ally you have is time. Yeah, well, oftentimes they say if you break off an intimate relationship, it's good not to have contact with the person for a little bit so your wounds can start to heal. Otherwise, it's like picking at a scab. So what was the name of the book you suggested about anger and resentment? It's called Your Perfect Right. It's about how to be assertive as opposed to be aggressive and or passive. Um, Thanks, Mike. I'm glad you appreciate the videos. So, Mike, if you are breaking off a 6-year relationship, there are what are called divorce support groups to go to. Go to meetup.com. We've got a couple in Portland, and you don't have to be going through a divorce, just any sort of a separation. I used to live nearby. Well, great. Well, you know how nice it is where I live. Hope you live in someplace equally nice. So, you're perfect, right? I think the last name of the author is something like Alberti, Alberti, something like that. But it's called You're Perfect, Right. Look it up on Amazon.com. I'm sure it's in print. Boise, Idaho. Well, I hear there's some nice things about Boise. My goddaughter's friend used to live there. So he probably got less rain than we do anyway. Anyway, yeah, letting go of resentment, dealing with anger, a big issue for many people who struggle with depression. Someone once said depression is anger turned inward. So if you stuff the anger, it's not a good idea. This reminds me of a joke that Woody Allen said on in one of his films. He says, "I don't get angry; I just grow tumors." So there's his belief that anger repressed can basically cause havoc in the mind and body. Mike Eco says one more thing. Yes. Do you have a question you want to ask? Go for it. So, anything else to add about depression being a relapsing condition, like I said earlier? Some people are lucky. Some people, I've known people who've had one bout of depression, but it was usually situational. I talked to Dad yesterday in the Vancouver area. Great. I'm glad you're still connected to your parents, a source of support. Anyway, when someone has a situational depression like loss, and of course they're going to get depressed. That's one of the 5 stages of grief. But if you have depression in your family, Arzar says hello. Trish says, I've been taking Wellbutrin for depression. It has helped a lot. It's starting to feel like it's causing OCD. Is it possible? I don't know. I've never seen that as a side effect of Wellbutrin. I'm on Wellbutrin, but you need to go check with your psychiatrist and go to drugs.com and look at the possible side effects of Wellbutrin. These drugs have multiple possible side effects. If it's causing OCD, maybe you can lower it a little bit. I'm suffering bipolar disorder, says Arbaz. What should I do? Well, you should go into mental health treatment. Bipolar disorder is totally treatable. There are mood stabilizers. Lithium was the only one for a while. Now we have Depakote and Topamax and Lamictal, which is a really good drug. Go get treatment. Go see a good doctor. Go see a good therapist. There's a book on, if you go to New Harbinger Press, go to their website, and they have tons of workbooks on bipolar disorder that are excellent workbooks. Get one of those workbooks and follow what it says. But yeah, you can live a really good life with bipolar disorder as long as you seek help and get tools. Mr. Bly says it's important to resolve sexual orientation issues, questions if a person is depressed. Yeah, I think so. I mean, questions about your questions about sexual orientation, especially if you think you might be transgender. I mean, that's a huge change, and of course, it's going to bring all sorts of feelings up, or whether you're gay or not. So yeah, issues of sexual orientation are definitely linked to stress and to mental health issues. So yeah, again, find a therapist or join groups that are with other people dealing with what you're dealing with. There's nothing like being in a group where people are struggling with what you're struggling. Arbaz, where do you live, by the way? Probably the Middle East. I told him I loved him, let go of 20 years long pain. Told him since he was 80 that I don't want him to die without knowing I loved him. Well, that's beautiful. Making peace with your parents or anybody else is so critical. So yeah, I wonder where you are, Arbaz. I have heard from people in other countries that mental health treatment is more difficult to get than in the United States. I always thought our mental health system was pretty bad, but after hearing stories of people from Nigeria and even people from Japan, which is supposedly a developed country, or even in England where they have the national health insurance and they say you have to wait for a therapist for a long time. Yeah, I mean, not mental health treatment is not equally accessible in all countries, but uh, that's the great thing about the internet. You can tune into my videos and other videos, on mental health recovery and get a lot of support that way. And you can also do long distance coaching. By the way, you're from Pakistan. Well, I got a call from somebody from Pakistan asking a question about mental health. So there are other people in Pakistan going through what you're going through. I do offer long distance coaching. If you go to healingfromdepression.com and you click on my link, most of all of my clients who I work with around the world first saw my videos on YouTube and then wrote me and asked if there's ways I can help. This is a 12-week program. It follows my book, Healing from Depression, 12 Weeks to a Better Mood, one chapter per week. You read the chapter, do the homework, we go over it over the phone. It's very, very helpful as an adjunct to other things you're doing. And most people, by the end of the 3 months, do feel better. Some people feel a lot better than when they started. So go to healingfromdepression.com. And by the way, if you have any questions, email me. I haven't given up my email address yet, but douglasblock@gmail.com. I do get a ton of emails, but I try to answer every one. Getting to the point where I'm kind of getting overwhelmed. If any of you need a job as an assistant, write me, fly to Portland. But sir, I think I will be dependent for tablets forever. No, you won't necessarily be dependent on tablets forever. And even if you were, remember what I said, I'm dependent on my glasses here, right? I'm dependent on fresh air to breathe, right? So if you're taking tablets and you're not miserable, isn't it worth it? I mean, you're dependent upon eating food, are you not? Uh, Getting dark circles under my eyes is that lack of sleep. It often is. Are you sleeping well? Check with your doctor. Dark circles under the eyes can be caused by problems with kidneys. Get a medical workup and check with a physician. Have you talked to people about an MTF active follic problem and keeping us from making neurotransmitters? No, I don't know what a MTF active follic problem is. I've been cutting my 150 milligrams of FeNO. Well, yeah, people can do that all the time. It can be helpful. Uh, um, so I don't know what MTMF is. Thank you for both your and Noah's videos. Says the Forever Freak. Well, thank you for making that kind comment. Chris says it messes with my day over otherwise. So yeah, if you cutting your Wellbutrin in half and it works for you, great. But always tell your nurse practitioner, your doctor that you're doing this. My nurse practitioner says so many people go off medication without telling them. I mean, that's kind of dumb, isn't it? I've had a number of people stop medication without telling their doctor, and they often pay the price. Please tell us before when you will have a Q&A. I want to watch it all live. So I do it every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, which would be, 7 p.m. British time. What do you charge over the phone? It's $50 a week, which is a lot less expensive than psychotherapy. I try to keep it reasonable. And again, that includes, the book, the exercise, and any questions you have by email. You send me the homework or the assignments in the workbook, and I go over them and send them back to you by email and give you my feedback, especially dealing a vision statement. That's the most important thing I do for people, is help them create vision statements of wellness. It is so important to have a clear mental image of what mental health recovery looks like for you. Otherwise, how can you go somewhere where you don't know where you're going? It's like you take a trip on a plane. You have to know you're going to Los Angeles to get there. So you have to know what your destination is. You have to know what your outcome is. Every coach, every life coach will tell you, you need to get clear on what your outcome is. And that's what a vision statement does. So those of you who don't do that, go to my website and also my YouTube channel and look under type in the search term, setting the intention to heal. I have a web page on it and a video on it. It will tell you why creating a vision statement is so important. Found a book on Kindle on a service. Well, Dorothy, will you please let me know how it works for you? It's not the only thing, but it probably might give you some good insights. douglasblock@gmail.com. God bless you, Douglas, or a positive affirmation. Jane says, I have a question. Well, guess what? I've decided to extend this to 60 minutes. So 5 minutes and 17 seconds left. So Jane, ask your question. But really, there's a book, most of you probably haven't heard of it, but it was very famous in its time. It's still very famous in the business community, called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. It is so important. Jane says, what's your opinion on anal beads? I'm thinking about getting a set of them to vibrate my ass. This is great. Would you pull start me like a Briggs and Stratton? I have absolutely no idea what that is about. Mike says, are affirmations good? Hey, go to my website, affirmationsheal.com, and I have a whole website on affirmations, including my book, Words That Heal, Affirmations and Meditations for Daily Living. I think affirmations are great. They're like mini vision statements. I got involved in them way back many years ago when I got involved in the Unity movement, and they're a wonderful tool. Do you do counseling for people in the UK, says Dorothy? Yeah, I have a client in the UK right now. I have one in Denmark. I have one. Thank you, says Mike. Yeah, affirmations are great. Sure, I have a guy. I said mentioned Dead Park here. Anyway, so yeah, other countries fine. All you need is Skype, or you need FaceTime, or something called WhatsApp, and we're only 8 hours different in the UK and Portland, so no problem setting up time. So if you're interested, yeah, go ahead and let me know. I need to keep a journal of daily affirmations and things to do. Yeah, a daily affirmation, daily journal is wonderful. I have to look to your website to write some down. Yeah, the Forever Freak. Go to affirmationsheal.com and you will find affirmations for health, for success, for prosperity, for emotional peace. And if you get my book, Words That Heal, which you can order on my website, is an ebook for only $2.99. You'll have like 300 affirmations in that book. Mike, if you are still struggling with depression and anxiety is affecting your workplace performance, how should you disclose to your employee HR? So at any rate, yeah, what you do is you are very judicious about who you tell. All the people who have been my clients who have had problems with performance at work due to depression and anxiety have shared it with their supervisor, who's always been understanding. So a lot more acceptance now. So if you think your supervisor is a compassionate person, I would definitely mention that to them, or the human resources department. You know, you cannot discriminate against people with depression. You can't fire somebody because they have a mental health disorder. That goes against the American Disabilities Act. So don't be afraid to tell people in your workplace that you're struggling. Hopefully your boss or the HR department is compassionate. Dorothy says, how do I contact you in the UK? Again, the email address is Douglas, DOUGLAS, BLOCH @gmail.com is how you contact me. So yeah, I remember when I had my breakdown in 96, 97, I went to the hospital after I had a bad reaction to a drug called Effexor. I was working as a salesperson in a company here in Portland, and I was out of work for 3 days. When I came back, I said, where were you? I said, well, I was in a hospital. He said, for what? I said, well, I had a sleeping disorder. I didn't really feel like in this particular case, telling them that I had a depressive break would have been helpful. Didn't matter because about 6 weeks I was so depressed and anxious I had to quit my job anyway. But again, most people in the workplace are very, very compassionate. Were you going to read one of the letters written by people who have worked through depression? Well, I was, and then I completely spaced it out. Thank you for reminding me, and I don't even know where the book is, and we have like 54 seconds left. I promise you that on Wednesday of next week, I will put it down on my calendar. In the meantime, the book is called The Recovery Letters. Check it out on Amazon.com. I think you can go, and if you email me, douglasblog@gmail.com, I have the manuscript in MS Word. I will send you a few of them. Hopefully that will entice you to buy the book. Jay from Chicago, I have to get back to work, but I wanted to say hi. Well, great. I'm glad you're saying hi because in 32 seconds, I'm going to say goodbye. But yeah, the recovery letters put together by a guy in the UK, very compassionate man. And if you email me, douglasblog@gmail.com, I will send you a couple of samples from the book. Well, it's been fun as always. And Thanks. Mr. B says, thanks for your time. It's always a pleasure. Well, as I say on my videos, until we meet again, I wish you the best in mental health recovery. Remember, this too shall pass. It will basically not last forever, whatever you're going through. And if you set the intention to heal, reach out for support, you will find help. God bless, health and wellness to everybody. And as we say, salud in whatever language. Thank you, Mike. I will have a great day, and the same to you. Adios, everybody.